Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our webinar on the occasion of International Anti-Corruption Day. Belgium after Operation Sky ECC, your role in eradicating corruption. Thank you all for being with us tonight, and welcome to our speakers, Jelle Janssens, Gudrun Vande Walle, and Marco Antonelli. I'm Sara van Torre. I'm Vice President of Belgian Social Anti-Mafia Association BASTA, which stands for Belgian Anti-Mafia Steps Towards Awareness. As our name suggests, our main objective is to raise critical awareness among the Belgian public about the presence and activities of organized crime and corrupt systems in Belgium and, by extension, in Europe. BASTA is now 2.5 years old, but we already existed before under the name Libera Brussels, which had been founded in 2013 as one of the first European antennas of Italian anti-mafia association Libera. We became an independent association to be better able to take root in Belgium as a Belgian association, but we still closely collaborate with Libera and many other partner organizations within the European network CHANCE, which stands for Civil Hub Against Organized Crime in Europe. CHANCE aims to give voice to civil society in the transnational fight against organized crime and corrupt systems. As a social anti-mafia association, we are convinced that corruption, organized crime, and mafia-type associations are phenomena which cannot be fought by institutions and law enforcement authorities alone. As they affect all levels of society, civil society has an important role to play too. But in order to be able to take action against these oppressive and undermining phenomena, citizens need to wake up and to gain critical understanding and consciousness of the problem. Gathering information is a crucial part of this critical understanding, and that is what we aim to do through our activities, to learn from experts, to inform others, and to better understand our role as a civil society association in the fight against corruption and organized crime and for social justice. BASTA has 2 fixed dates on the agenda. It's the 21st of March, which is the day of remembrance and commitment in memory of all victims of the mafias, and the 9th of December, which is today. On the 9th of December, we celebrate International Anti-Corruption Day. It's a day in which we focus attention on it's a day that is celebrated every year on 9 December to focus attention on the global United Against Corruption campaign promoted by the United Nations Development Programme and the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime. The campaign aims to raise awareness on the fact that corruption is a serious phenomenon that can undermine social and economic development in all societies, and that no country, no region, no community is immune to this phenomenon. Every year, the International Anti-Corruption Day campaign focuses on a specific theme, which we, as BASTA, try to adopt in our yearly event, and which we also try to relate to the Belgian context. This year's edition is entitled Your Right, Your Role, Say No to Corruption. And it aims to underline that it is not only countries that need to unite and face corruption with shared responsibility, but that every single person has a role to play in preventing and countering corruption, as well as in promoting resilience and integrity at all levels of society. And to achieve this, policies, systems, and measures need to be in place for people to be able to speak up and say no to corruption. We've chosen a specific event, or rather a series of events, through which we will try to concretize the general theme and connect it to Belgian reality. Last spring, Operation Sky ECC set the tone for 2021 in terms of the fight against corruption and organized crime in Belgium. It will undoubtedly continue to reverberate for many months and years to come. And for those who may have missed it, last March, an international group of judicial and law enforcement authorities from Belgium, France, and the Netherlands successfully dismantled the encrypted communication service tool Sky ECC, through which serious criminals and criminal networks had until then been communicating. Quite soon, the Public Prosecutor's Office and the Federal Police announced that corruption would be one of the first priorities in the investigations, because what emerged from these investigations was that an important part of the drug trafficking business in and through Belgium could take place thanks to the collaboration and the corrupt behavior of a number of lawyers, police officers, a number of employees of the Antwerp Public Prosecutor's Office, a hospital, the City of Antwerp, a port authority, Federal Public Service, Finance, and so on. These people had passed on sensitive information to criminals or had somehow collaborated with them. Those employees were citizens who should have guarded the integrity of the system for the good of the whole community, for the common good, but why didn't they? For us, as BASTA, this operation has raised the following question: as Operation Sky ECC has exposed deeply rooted corruption at every level of Belgian society, then what does our society need to eradicate and prevent these forms of corruption? And how can civil society contribute to this process? We've invited 3 experts to share their insights and help us answer these and many other questions. Jelle Janssens, Gudrun Vande Walle, and Marco Antonelli. They will each give a 10 to 15-minute presentation, after which there will be some time for discussion and for questions from the audience, which you can leave in the YouTube live chat, which should be on the right side of your screen. So let me give the virtual floor to Professor Jelle Janssens. He's an associate professor at the Department of Criminology, Criminal Law and Social Law of Ghent University. And there he works with the Institute of International Research on Criminal Policy. As an expert, he's frequently invited by Belgian as well as foreign parliaments, ministries, governments, and intelligence services to evaluate or help develop policies, plans, and administrative approaches regarding security and tackling organized crime. We've invited him to help us shed light on the effectiveness, accountability, and transparency of our institutions and law enforcement authorities in the fight against corruption. Professor Janssens, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Sarah, and good evening, everyone. So I'm a professor of criminology. I teach financial and economic crime at Ghent University. And organized crime as well. But 10 years ago, in 2011, I was contributing to a research on national integrity systems of Belgium together with Transparency International. And that opened my eyes with regard to anti-corruption policies in Belgium. My title here is Nothing to Worry About, ? Well, it might be rhetorical, but this is something that we tend to think in Belgium. There's nothing to worry about with regard to corruption. After the Sky ECC investigations, I was contacted by a reporter of a newspaper, and allegedly he had contacted other colleagues, and all my other colleagues said, well, corruption is not a problem in Belgium. What are you talking about? Well, Sky ECC told us something completely different. And what I want you to do in the next 10 minutes is quickly take you back with me to the Stroomplan in Antwerp. I've been involved in the evaluation of the Stroomplan in Antwerp, but I will also give you a couple of figures with regard to corruption in Belgium to go back to Antwerp afterwards. So this is 2 parts. It's going to be very quickly, so 10 minutes, no longer, no less. So the Stroomplan, what is the problem here? Well, as you can see from this graphic, you see that each year police authorities and custom authorities are seizing a lot of drugs in the port of Antwerp, and it's increasing. And we know that this is around 10% or less, even less, of what goes through the port of Antwerp. So we see that annually there's an increased confiscation at European gateways, but the port of Antwerp is especially very important for drug cartels. And we see also, together with an analysis that we did with colleagues from the Netherlands, that violence and corruption is related to the cocaine market. So cocaine is flooding into the port of Antwerp. And as a result, the city of Antwerp, together with the federal police and the local police, decided to address this issue. And they developed the Stroomplan. They sought, well, they were looking for help from the Minister of Justice, the Interior, Social Inspectorate Services, custom authorities, everyone to contribute to the demise of the hopefully demise of cocaine trafficking in the port of Antwerp. And the Stroomplan is built on 4 axes. The important one here for us is the 4th one, axis 4, implementing an integrity and anti-corruption policy. The idea here is to increase resilience. So what basically did the city of Antwerp, the Minister of Justice, the Minister of the Interior, the local and federal police seek to do? Well, to say stop with, to establish barriers, to prevent cocaine from flooding into the city of Antwerp, but also dealing with criminal clans. But they also recognized the need to develop what they called a Kali Charter. And the Kali Charter was basically to include everyone contributing against the fight against cocaine trafficking in Antwerp. So everyone who contributed in the Kali team was the federal police, was the local police, custom authorities, tax inspectorate services, social inspectorate services. And by joining forces, they would need a new deontological or a code of conduct, something like that, to make sure that there will be no leaks to the outside world or even drug criminals. Now, in the evaluation of Axis 4 in 2019, we have seen that Axis 4 was not, well, they did not do anything with regard to Axis 4. So while the law enforcement authorities were heavily investigating criminal activities, so for Axis 1, 2, and 3, they were actively involved in dealing with cocaine trafficking. Integrity policies were left like that. And being interpolated, the Minister of Justice and the Minister of the Interior said, well, we rely on the code of conducts of each and every organization involved and the legislation involved, because we are working with professional law enforcement agencies and they all have their code of conduct. So is it really necessary to develop a special code of conduct or anti-corruption policy for the investigators involved in cocaine trafficking? Because indeed, the police have a code of conduct, the customs authorities have a code of conduct, they do have disciplinary measures, there's a criminal legislation, everything is there to avoid police officers, customs officers, civil servants to go and help drug criminals through corruption. For example, in Belgium, we do have a code of conduct for the local police and the federal police. But there's a special thing here. With the screening of integrity of police officers, we adopt the idea that once a police officer in Belgium is clean, he or she is always clean. If you do not need access to special classified documents, you are never going to be screened again during your career. If you're not popping up in one of these anti-gambling measures, you're never going to be screened again. So if you stay low, you're in your 40 years career, you only get screened once in Belgium as a police officer. So part 1, corruption in Belgium. Nothing to worry about. This is what they say, and this is what we tend to see as well. If you look at the Eurobarometer 482 that was published in December 2019, 300 interviews were being conducted with entrepreneurs in Belgium. And they were asked, entrepreneurs, they were asked the likelihood of being caught or reported to the police while conducting corrupt activities. And it's interesting to see here at the left-hand side that, well, virtually 50%, half of respondents say, well, it's basically unlikely that you will be caught or reported when doing corrupt activities, when doing business. And even if you get caught, it's very unlikely that you're going to be heavily fined or imprisoned. This is the attitude of our entrepreneurs, and it says something about how corruption is being dealt with in Belgium. I told you that in 2011, I was working on the national integrity system together with Transparency International. Well, In 2011, fight against corruption was no longer a federal priority again in Belgium. So as of 2004 to 2011, fighting corruption was a priority for the security services in Belgium. As of 2011, it was not. If you look at others, the Eurobarometer 502 in June 2020, 1,007 respondents were contacted. These are citizens. What about the problem of corruption? Well, in 2019, we see that there's an increase of people, civilians, thinking that the problem of corruption is widespread. Personal knowledge of persons taking or having taken bribes, 13%. Do you know where to report corruption? Overwhelmingly, nobody knows in Belgium. So these are the Belgian figures of the Eurobarometer. So there's quite a problem. While people tend to believe that corruption is widespread, there are 13% that they know of taking bribes, but they do not know how to report. And if you then finally look at Public Prosecutor's Office, these are the figures about the registered corruption cases with the things here: extortion, public corruption, conflict of interest, etc. These are low figures, 140, 120, 100. And even then, if you would look at the progression, how many cases are being submitted to the judge for trial? This is the brown one here in the low. Here, you can't even see it. So to say that we do not have a problem in Belgium, yes, if you look at the figures, we do not have a problem at registered corruption cases. But if you look at the other attitudes, we might have a problem. And this has become very clear in Antwerp with regard to organized crime and drug trafficking. If you look at the amounts of money that goes around, so for each successful transaction, the coke comes into the port of Antwerp in containers, and where these containers are being scanned or not is based on samples. So it's very unlikely that a container will be scanned in Belgium. We do not have the resources, and the economy needs supply. So it needs to go fast. So we cannot check every and each container. But people, a coordinator of a container terminal deciding where to put a container, receives, after a successful transaction, 225,000 euros. A planner, someone who says that container needs to arrive at that point, receives 75,000 to 125,000. A driver of a truck moving the container from place A to B receive up to 75,000 euros. And even then, when the driver would pick out the packages of cocaine out of the container, he receives or she receives 500 to 1,000 euros per kilo drugs in addition. So these are huge amounts of money that go around. And these are being invested as well in regular shops and fishmongers, etc. So accountants are involved, notaries are involved as well in money laundering. So if we take a look at the network of drug trafficking, cocaine trafficking, you see that we have farmers, we have paste-based purchasers, processors, labs, but this one is interesting. Air marine distribution, this is the angle from Latin America to Antwerp or through West Africa to Antwerp, distribution, money launderers, brokers, retail, couriers. All these people are involved, and while these people are involved, these are all small networks. People who know each other and people who tend to rely on each other for services. And if you take into account the amount of money that goes around, it takes a network to deal with a network. And just neglecting corruption is a failure of the Belgian police and prosecutor's office. We see that at Sky ECC. Sky ECC was an encrypted messaging service, very popular with drug traffickers, and it was hacked by an international team of ITers. It was not paid for by the regular budget. It was paid for by a sum of money that the Americans, the US, donated to the Antwerp police, well, to the COIV, the confiscation organization, for services delivered in the past. So that money was used to collect a number of IT specialists and try to hack this encrypted messenger service. It was led by the federal prosecutor, and it was operational for 3 weeks. So during 3 weeks, they were able, the police, to monitor everything what was said on these smartphones of these drug criminals. Why only 3 weeks? People started to leak. Leaks were getting out. So the police decided, stop here and now. Federal prosecutor decided, stop here and now, because otherwise we would be ratted out. So only 3 weeks. We could have monitored for a year, but we only had 3 weeks. So it says something about the level of corruption and pervasiveness of people involved in drug trafficking in Antwerp. Here are some headlines from Belgian newspapers: prison sentences for people working the ports, lawyers that have been detected through the Sky ECC operation, people working for the city, people working for hospitals, people working for the tax administration, for companies working in the port of Antwerp. Basically, the convergence of the upper and underworld. So, ladies and gentlemen, nothing to worry about, eh? Well, we have a lot to worry about. In 2011, I started working on national integrity systems in Belgium, and in 2021, we see what happens if you do not take into account corruption as a fundamental part in fighting drug trafficking in the port of Antwerp. Thank you very much. That was 10 minutes, I think, or 11.
I can't. Phone. Hello, can you hear me? I couldn't switch on my microphone again. Okay, thank you so much for this very interesting presentation. I'm sure there will be lots to discuss later. I already have some questions in mind. Let me remind the audience that they can leave their questions for Jelle Janssens and for the other speakers, of course, in the live chat of YouTube. And then allow me to present our second speaker, Gudrun Vande Walle, who holds a PhD in criminology and who works as a forensic auditor at the Integrity Center of the Federal Ombudsman, the reporting channel for integrity violations in the federal public sector in Belgium. She's also a visiting professor of integrity management at Ghent University. And we've invited her to learn more about, among other things, what the Belgian government is doing to put in place effective whistleblower protection, for instance. The United Nations Convention Against Corruption emphasizes the responsibility of governments to do so in order to ensure that people who speak up are protected from retaliation. So we wonder whether the Belgian institutions are fully assuming this responsibility to be as effective, accountable and transparent as possible, and to promote a culture of integrity and fairness. Gudrun, the floor is yours.
Okay, Sarah, can you hear me? Because I don't see anyone anymore.
Yes.
Okay, it's fine. Okay, good evening, everybody, and thank you, Basta, to invite us to talk a bit about whistleblowing, our work, and about the transposition of the EU directive, because it's always important to explain to people why whistleblowing is really important. So the International Anti-Corruption Day seeks, in fact, to highlight this year the rights and responsibilities of everyone to tackle corruption. And if we speak about employees, if you ask to them to take responsibility, then in fact you have to create a kind of speak-up culture, because it's really dangerous for people who are dependent of their employer to speak up. So speak up, so you have to create a kind of speak-up culture, and a speak-up culture, that means in fact an open culture, an organizational culture, where people are safe to speak out, to raise issues, to criticize some topics. And it's also an organization where people can raise integrity breaches without fearing retaliation. An ideal situation is, in fact, that people can raise problems about corruption or integrity in the meeting room, or in a meeting with their supervisor, for example. That's the ideal situation. But in most cases, the speak-up culture is still far away. So the UN emphasizes the importance to put whistleblowing systems in place, safe reporting systems. If we have a look to Belgium, there also we see that we are far from a speak-up culture. Almost every day in the newspaper and the press, we read about retaliations against whistleblowers. Even also yesterday, there was a whistleblower of conflicts of interests in a parliamentary institution who resigned because of fear for retaliation. There was also a policeman who testified on negative measures because he informed his supervisor of misbehavior by colleagues, and so on. And also in our daily practice as the external reporting system, reporters explained to us that they have knocked at a lot of doors inside the organization to talk about integrity breaches, but no one wanted to listen to them. And in the end, they end at our office, the external reporting channel. So we can say that we are in fact far from a speak up culture. And maybe, however, the transposition of the EU directive now can be the first step, I think, to a speak up culture. So what I want to do today of tour evening is to present a bit our whistleblowing system, the strengths and the weaknesses connected to it, and to discuss also with you the EU directive, how that it will improve the rights of whistleblowers and how it can contribute to an anti-corruption policy, in fact. So first, as an introduction, so I work for the Center for Integrity, and it's a department of the Federal Ombudsman. So the legislator at the time of 2013, 2040, they decided to install the external reporting channel at the office of the Federal Ombudsman because of its independency. So we are there for reports of by civil servants of the federal administration. So for the 65,000 civil servants of the about 70 federal administrations. We are 4 fraud investigators who, and our role, I will explain a bit our role in our office. So first of all, an important role is to inform people about whistleblowing systems, reporting systems. That's important, but also not that easy because all that federal administrations, a lot have a central department in Brussels, and it's not difficult to reach these offices, but a lot of administrations are also further away in Antwerp, the harbor of Antwerp, in Luxembourg, at the coast, Belgian coast. And a lot of people also are field workers, and it's very difficult to inform them about whistleblowing systems. While these, as Jelle explained, or these people in fact see a lot and experience a lot in their daily activities. Then if people think they are presume that they are a witness of an integrity breach, they can come to us with their documents, with their files, and we will check the admissibility of their case. It's a formal check, but we will also see if there is a reasonable presumption that something happened. It's also it's a preliminary phase, in fact, to protect a bit the organization and the reporter to avoid to start too fast an investigation. And if we say yes, there is a reasonable presumption of an integrity breach, we will start an investigation on the spot, and which means that we will in the organization collect documents, go through procedures, and at the end of the investigation we will also interview witnesses and also the people concerned. And the investigation ends always with a final report that goes to the president of the administration, in which we also add some recommendations to prevent that the same cases will be repeated. Important also is the feedback to reporters. in a lot of scientific scientific researches, we read time after time that reporters are stimulated to report when they get feedback of their report, when they know that something happened with the facts that they reported. So that's something really important, but also difficult, because there you have to search for a balance between explaining reporters what happened, what you have done, and on the other hand, the rights of defense of the people concerned, because they still have to go through a disciplinary procedure or maybe to a penal procedure. Important also in our system is the protection of reporters and also everybody who was involved in the investigation. And what does that mean? That means that every person who thinks to be a victim of retaliation, of a negative measure, because of reporting, because he was involved in the investigation, can come to us and explain what happened, and then we have a reversion of the burden of proof. It will be the president or it will be the administration who will prove that there is no connection between the negative measure and the reporting. Okay. Something about our scope. The personal scope is quite limited, so we are only civil servants or former civil servants can report or can use the external reporting system at the federal level. The material scope is quite large, and it's larger than, in fact, what is written in the EU directive now. So people can come to report, for example, when there is a violation of the law, the rules, or the procedures in their organization, and it goes against public interest. So, for example, someone did not respect public procurement rules with a huge impact on the other candidates who took part in the tender, or maybe also with a negative impact for the quality of the work, maybe for with health risks, safety risks, and so on. Conflicts of interest, for example, something that happens a lot. The accumulation of functions by civil servants. So they work during the day for the administration. In the night, they are a consultant for a private company, or they have their own private company, and you see a mixed up of both interests. Also, risks of life, health, or safety can be reported. So, for example, a supervisor of a workshop who does not respecting safety measures in the organization, or, for example, problems with chemical waste transport. Professional misconduct, for example, and we have had a case where an inspector who refused to follow the procedure, who refused to fulfill some specific controls, so professional misconduct, or someone who didn't respect his position of management, who made abuse of his position of leadership. And the last thing is asking or advising us by a staff member to commit an integrity breach. In a lot of cases, we see that employees are responsible for the integrity breach, but they committed it because they were put under pressure because of by a staff member. So if you see the scope, maybe you say, yeah, there's no direct connection to organized crime. There's no direct connection to drug trafficking. But indirectly, there are some cases who are connected to corruption. For example, a fictitious example, a customs officer or an inspection officers at the management level, maybe in the harbor or in the airport, who has a too close connection to an export company, for example. You can also say maybe that the cases that we investigate are rather small, small in financial impact, for example. But everything the early detection of irregularities in an early stage prevents an escalation of integrity breaches to huge corruption cases. So I think it's important also to detect at an early stage. And also small irregularities may be a first sign of a hidden phenomenon, a crime phenomenon behind. So this is our system with some strengths. I think the strength is, for example, the protection, the strength is the material scope, but also with some weaknesses. For example, the protection is limited in time to 3 years after the closure of the investigation. So let's have a look if the EU directive on the reporting of union breaches and the transposition of it will improve the rights of reporters. And for that, I go through some headlines of the EU directive that are important. First of all, the EU directive defines that for the first time that as well for the private sector as for the public sector, member states are responsible to install whistleblowing systems. Up till now, we had only almost only for the public sector some systems at the federal level, certainly also and for the Flemish part, for the German community, but not for Brussels, for Walloon. It's still really at the beginning. For the private sector, some whistleblowing systems are developed, for example, in the financial sector or for money laundering, but these systems are really rare. So a lot of most employees in the private sector do not have the occasion to report irregularities in their organization. So this is important. Secondly, there are 3 possibilities to report: internal reporting channel, the external reporter channel, and the public disclosure. And the internal reporting channel, that is something very important, because this is the first step, in fact, to create a speak-up culture. It's creating proximity in your own organization, creating a possibility in the organization to report irregularities, and making it possible to react very fast, very quickly on small irregularities to prevent a escalation. So the EU directive says this is important. Try to install in every organization an internal reporting system that is confidential, that respects some rules, but that is quite easily accessible. It's important also because we see also in our organization that most people who knock at our doors are already went already through in their organization to their supervisor, to a colleague, to the trade union to report, and it didn't work. So we are convinced it's important. Then you have the external reporting channel. There are foreseen a bit more strict conditions. It's more, it must be more formalized. It must be a real competent authority, in fact, to report. And it's also the external reporting channel that will provide the protection. Finally, also very important is the public disclosure, because public disclosure under some conditions, people who disclose in public under some conditions can enjoy also the protection status. So this is really important because we see that a lot of people are enforced in the end to report in public by the media, by social media. The EU directives puts also a strong emphasis on informing people, and that's also important because we see that a lot of people are in fact underrepresented in our statistics. For example, as I explained, the field workers, most people who report are in fact have a desk job, are of the A or B level. Women are also underrepresented. 25% of reporters, only 25% are women. and also people with limited seniority, people who are just started and are a few years in started a few years ago their career. They are in a very weak position, and for them it's important when they experience some irregularities, then they can report, and it's important to inform them about reporting systems. And finally, what's also really important in the EU directive is the support measures. Even if it's put a bit aside by legislators of the people who are working now on the legislation, it is really important because we see that reporting puts a lot of pressure on people. We ask to people to keep it confidential that they report it to avoid retaliation. So they can't talk to anyone, and at a certain moment it is too much, and they start to talk to colleagues that they trusted, but in fact these colleagues are not that trustful. So they really need psychological support. So that's also a really important element in the EU directive. Okay. So to conclude, where are we now in the procedure? The 17th of December, there will no legislation here in Belgium, certainly not for the federal level and not for the private sector. There are texts. There are also a lot of texts that have been spread. So there's already a lot of information public about these proposals. But it has still some time to go before these legislation are finished. To conclude, what is important here is reporting is the most important mechanism for detecting integrity breaches. It's proven in scientific research, also by the ACFE yearly statistics. So it's important, but it can't be the only one element of an integrity policy. As Jelle explained also, it is also important to have a prevention program to prevent integrity breach, to prevent corruption. It's also important to create a speak up culture, to create a trustful culture in your organization. And finally, a lot is always said about protection. And protection is the most important element in whistleblowing. Yes, it is, but it's also a very difficult procedure. It's very difficult to prove, or it's a very difficult procedure once you are in a discussion with the administration. They say the negative measures are taken for that reason, and they try to prove that there is no connection to the reporting. So confidentiality is in fact the most important element in a whistleblowing system in the EU directive. Thank you very much. I stop here, and maybe there are some questions later on.
Thank you very much, Gudrun. Now let me introduce our last speaker, Marco Antonelli. As the theme of this year's International Anti-Corruption Day edition suggests, every citizen should be aware of the fact that corruption doesn't only involve corruptors, the corrupted, and the state, but society as a whole. And to better understand what popular active participation could look like in the fight against corruption, and maybe also in the creation of a speak up culture, we've invited Marco Antonelli. Marco Antonelli holds a PhD in political science and works at the Observatory on Political Corruption and Organized Crime at the University of Pisa in Italy. His research focuses on the presence of mafias in migration areas, on the way criminal organizations operate in the port sector, and on the prevention of corruption in the public sector. He will explain how, through community-based monitoring, civil society can become more aware of their role and responsibilities in the fight against corruption. Marco, the floor is yours.
Thanks. I share my screen and my presentation. Thank you so much for the invitation, for this really interesting opportunity to present some part of the research that we are conducting at the University of Pisa. I will try to stay in 10 minutes. It's not so easy, and it's not so easy to speak after to so interesting presentation, but I'll try to do my best. So, fighting corruption, the role of civic society. What can civil society do against corruption? The answer is a lot. You could say that maybe it's too easy to answer this way, but I'll try to explain during my presentation. Corruption is defined as the abuse of entrusted power for private gain. Now we focus on public corruption. When we speak about and we talk about public corruption, we need to imagine, and we need to say that it deals with the context in which corruption happens. So if we speak, the matters, the context in which corruption happens matters. It's something important. It deals with the fact that how institution works, how the economy works, how the civil society is aware about the problem of corruption. So corruption has an economic impact, a social-cultural matter, is a political and administrative issue. If the corruption deals with the context, civil society can do a lot, because can challenge the actors that created the context in which corruption spread. Just one background notes, an example of this from Italy, Libera, that Sarah mentioned before during the presentation, started a campaign a few years ago. It was called Together Against Corruption. It was on three main assets: bring out corruption, so support people who are going to report, such as whistleblowers. The second asset, resist against corruption, so conduct integrity and anti-corruption training courses in school of all levels and grades, elementary school, but as well university. And the third one, protect what is precious, protect the common goods. How doing so? Building monitoring communities to defend common goods from corruption. So let's focus on civic monitoring. What we are talking about if we say civic monitoring. We can say that during the last decades, the relationship between citizen and institution has changed a lot, and the same is now. Democracy is changing. Civil society can have an important role in public scrutiny. We can say that in public scrutiny, actions are involved different actors. You have a lot of different mechanisms, scales, and forms. Public scrutiny, if we think about the introduction of internet and introduction of social media, you can see that what happens on the other side of the world is something that can be faced also from people in Europe, and so it's a complex system of interaction in which people are really involved and can really talk directly with the institution, can have a really important role in the scrutiny of the decision-making process, and on what they are decision at the end of this process. So the monitoring of civil society is quite different from the institutional monitoring. Also against corruption, the monitoring of an institution has a different goal from the civic one. They try to detect corruption. They use different instruments, so they are not equals. Civic monitoring deals also not only with the detection of corruption, but also to put some red flags on what is happening that could be corruption, but could be also be sort of maladministration action. So that's the main slide that I'd like to present. We tried, at least Ferrante and Vannucci in 2017 tried to create a sort of guide for a monitoring community. It was guessed for and images a model applied to the Italian case, but it can be applied, I think, also in other different countries. It is divided into 3 steps. The first step deals with the transparency. So it's shedding light. The community that are networks in which are involved citizen, association, group of different kind of group that have in common one question from which they start. That is, there's something wrong in my territory, could be in my background, or could be in my city, in my council, in my region, in my country. I want to face it. What's wrong in this situation, in this context? And they start with step 1, shedding light on the problem, on the issue. But they need to be aware of some little steps that has to be made. Why to shed light? Why to search for transparency? Which data they really need to know? And also, they need to be aware that there are some tools that the citizen have in order to ask for transparency, ask for accountability to the institution. A lot of public data are released every day, but sometimes it's difficult to find them and to analyze them. So the very first step is to, if we face with this problem, we need to have data, we need to have transparency to reach that data, and then we need to transform that data into some kind of information. And then we arrive to the step number 2, being vigilant, using the data. The data need to be converted in information. If they are answered to the very first question, they need to be shared with the other people, with the community in general, with the citizens. So the monitoring community need to face the problem of reaching people's attention and then also reaching institutional attention, because when you find out a problem, you need also to discuss with the public authorities that has a role in take decision on the topic. So being vigilant also on what's the public answer that the institution gave on the problem. And then the last step is to take in part. So try to start a sort of a process in which civic society are engaged, also implementing anti-corruption policy in order to ask for transparency, to help institution taking the right decision. It could be you can say, oh, it's too easy to say like that, but I'd like during my conclusion saying that in this role for civic society, encouraging participation. So what I really want to say, and I'll stop sharing my presentation, concluding and stay in my 10 minutes is that it's not only about detection that we are dealing with when we speak about civil society monitoring corruption, monitoring common goods. It's about prevention. Community, civil society need also to prevent corruption, need to put red flags on issue, on public and common problems, and need to at the very end to take care about the common goods. So to involve people, shed light on a problem, discuss it publicly, and then take action on that. And this is something that comes before. That is before the detection of corruption is something in order to prevent the corruption to happen. I stop. I think I stayed in 11 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. That was very, very interesting. Thank you to all three of you. The BASTA volunteers are gathering some of the questions from the audience. And after having listened to your presentations, the main question I have in mind for the three of you is what could be a concrete next step for civil society in Belgium. We've heard that corruption is not the greatest priority of our institutions, of our authorities. Jelle and Gudrun, you know these institutions best. Do you think they are open to a dialogue with civil society as proposed in Marco's presentation, or what could be one of the first steps to raise the awareness, maybe also of our institutions? Maybe civil society, academia, institutions could cooperate, but there needs to be a dialogue, an open dialogue, to create this culture of integrity and fairness. Yeah, maybe.
I will go.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I think our institutions are always open to discussion. So I know that our police, local, federal, are always open to discuss issues with civil society. Politicians are usually open to discuss things with civil society as well. But I think you raise a very interesting question, and a question I don't have the answer to, Sarah. It's my question as well. What can civil society do to contribute to the fight against corruption? I look at these initiatives that are being taken by the Public Prosecutor's Office in Limburg to fight, to contribute to early detection of drug trafficking. I look at these anonymous call lines you can call when you are working in the port of Antwerp. There are initiatives to individuals to help fight drug trafficking and corruption. But from a civil society perspective, I think that's a difficult one. And indeed, I think there can be a contribution. There can be a contribution. And I think that that's an openness as well, because up till today, I told you already, corruption is not a priority for the Belgian security plan. So in the Belgian security plan, corruption is no longer a priority. But this is going to change. The federal prosecutor, for example, already demanded that corruption would once again be integrated into the national security plan for the next year, for 2022, 2026, something like that. So there might be some change due to the Sky ECC and Antwerp cases. But I was more looking towards Marco to give us some ideas about how to integrate civil society in the fight against corruption. Marco, enlighten me, please.
Yeah, I'll try. Sarah did a really difficult question. So I share with you the complexity and of the problem. I think that we really need to focus. We focus on something different from detection in order to give their civil society an important role in fighting corruption. I mean, when we think about fighting corruption, we can say, okay, we have repression. That is something that is really strict with the power of the police enforcement. So it's something which probably civil society can be less involved. If I think about drug trafficking in port, I say, no, okay, it's really different. What civil society can do, I think, can be applied for drug trafficking in the port, but also in different fields, it's to say, okay, we have this problem, drug trafficking. It is possible because of corruption of employments and because there are some rules that rule the port this way that helps corruption, that helps drug trafficking to happen. Okay, civil society can say, we need to speak with the unions that works in the ports in order to improve something different. We need to speak with the employers, not just to say drug trafficking is bad things, but in order to say, okay, let's see what happens at the end of this trafficking, what happens to people, what is the impact of corruption, of drug trafficking in our daily life. It is difficult to not to do, but it is a sort of street that we can do, and the other one is not to step up for asking for a different kind of maybe management, to ask for the process and judicial process to be effective when corruption is detected. The data that you presented were, like, say, okay, you have a problem. Also in Italy, and don't be afraid that it's something that we are sharing. I don't know if you think that it could be, I don't know how it works unions in Antwerp, but I see Gudrun that wants sorry.
Just to answer the question of the audience, I see a possibility of involving the civil society on different points. The first point is, in fact, since 2 years now, we are discussing, in fact, the whistleblowing and how the member states have to deal with the transposition of this whistleblowing. And we have had a lot of webinars and a lot of discussions with academics and with citizens and with the private sector and public sector. And this has been a very important period, I think, for before the transposition, but because now a lot of people are persuaded now that it's really there's really a need for a whistleblowing system. So here we have, before the transposition of the EU directive, it was really important to convince everybody. So, and I think a lot of people from civil society were involved in that process. The second element is that the EU directive is not says the personal scope of whistleblowing can't be limited to the employees, but it's open now for contractors, trainees, people who apply for a job and who see already integrity breaches. All these people have the must have the chance to report. So you give a chance already to civil society in a professional, the moment they have a professional relation to the organization where you have the integrity breach, at that moment they can blow the whistle. So it's open, it opens, in fact, the system to citizens. And the last element is, I think, the prevention and in creating a speak up culture in organizations. It's also the tasks of a task of clients, of citizens, to report, to complain about things that they see in their environment, that they see happens in organizations, in private organizations, and in administrations. So it's also trying to create a speak-up culture for citizens. So, thank you.
Sarah, well, I've got a question because if you look at the Eurobarometer data collected in 2019, around 70% of people do not know where to report. And Gudrun, you're talking about the federal ombudsman and the role it plays, also including with the police, with the new whistleblowing regulation in which the police should report to Community B and has a whistleblower regulation as well. Where should people report if they see corruption? So we're talking about civil society, indeed, the typical civil society, but these civil society organizations are very often composed of people who have interest in drug trafficking as well. We do see in Antwerp, for example, in the city of Antwerp, but also in Limburg, when you start talking about housing and projects, for example, with regard to real estate, you go to talk to people about who have these real estate properties that they are selling or putting on the market for rent, and you see that these are being abused. Well, most of these people, or very often these people, are involved in drug trafficking as well. So how to make sure that on the one hand, civil society is an equal partner that stays clean of drug trafficking, but on the other hand, if people say we do not know where to report, where should they report to? And how can we make sure that they are heard, and where they have the information to report to? Gudrun?
Okay, thank you for the question, Jelle. But I think that the EU directive provides quite a lot of possibilities and conditions to report. For example, as I said, they have the chance. They need a chance for internal reporting. So, for example, also the real estate sector, they will have to create a reporting system. So, I suppose that some people, that not all people working for these sectors are rotten elements. I think there are also some people who want to fulfill their job in integrity. Yeah, other possibilities.
My question to you, Gudrun,
what?
My question to you is: we do have a lot of ombudspersons in Flanders and the Walloon region. How can we make sure that people know where to turn to?
How people know where to
turn to. So if you say, for example, I'm a shop owner and I see somebody opening up a new shop and with the same products but being sold under the price at the market, where am I going to turn to? Because this is the real thing that is going on in Antwerp, and the money is being laundered through these shops, and the legal economy is hurting. But as a commercial entrepreneur, I don't know where to turn to.
Yeah, we are not creating an alternative for the police and the public prosecutor. I think they are still there for reporting this kind of cases, and reporting systems are maybe a more accessible stage to report. And we also work together with a public prosecutor. If we find out that something is criminal, we will send the file to the public prosecutor. But I think for most citizens, these are the most important reporting systems: the police, public prosecutor, and it's important to create a trust of citizens in these services, and the other way around, that the public prosecutors have also trust in citizens who want to report.
So isn't that the basic argument? How to include citizen participation?
May I say something? I can ask Jelle, Gudrun, if they are agree with this proposal. That's a task for the civil society in Belgium, because we are facing two problems. The first one is the people don't know how to report, to whom report if they see something that is no, something is not good. And the second one, what can civil society do? I can say that in Italy there's a case, Libera, with the other association, started a sort of was the first asset that I presented in that campaign to support the people who wants to report something. So it's a sort of call center, call support. There's a number you can call, and people from the association helps you, introduce you, and say, okay, you can say what's your problem, what you say that is your problem, your private company, on your own, or in your public administration. And I say if it's something relevant for the penal code of your country, then I say, okay, it's better for you to go with a lawyer to the police enforcement and discuss with that, as Gudrun said. Or if it's something that you can signaling and reporting internally, then I can help you in order to report it correctly. Because I don't know, Gudrun, if it's something that is happening in Belgium. What's happening in Italy is that people make reports to the internally and to the national anti-corruption authority, but from the data and the report that the agency present, they say, okay, a lot of reports arise and you cannot even read it, you cannot understand what's the problem. They are wrongly completed, so it's difficult also for them to take. What do you think? It could be something that could happen the same in Belgium? It's something like that is already there?
It's also something I think that is foreseen now in the EU directive, in the more specifically in the support measures, where it is said that you have to foresee for people judicial assistance, judicial support. So if people want to report and they are afraid for retaliation, that you can lead them a bit through all the procedures. So I think this is an important element, these support measures. So yes, I think an organization like Libera, or that helps people to report, that helps to, for example, to put the defects on paper, to collect all the kind of documents. It's something important. In the EU directive, it is mentioned as someone, as the facilitator, someone who helps reporters to collect everything. And in some cases, as you says, in some cases it's difficult for people to put everything on paper. So you have to be, as a reporting system, really accessible. You can't ask to people to complete a difficult form, but invite people to explain the case and try to take notes together with them. And the second thing is try to create facilitators, people who help people to report.
I think that this could be a task for Basta.
The
I
Basta
want this
call.
bomb in the middle of the
Yes, but it's a very interesting proposal, and it's food for thought. Absolutely, and it could also there we would also need a collaboration between institutions and academia and civil society associations, like BASTA, for instance. So that's very interesting. So we have received many questions from the audience, and I think maybe Valeria wants to join us to ask them. present.
Good evening, everybody. Yes, apparently the topic was very interesting for many people, so we have quite a good number of questions. I will start with the first one. It's from Emma. She's interested. She has been preparing her thesis at Ghent about corruption in drug trafficking with a focus on the role of police, justice, and lawyers. And she was wondering if the speakers they can provide a few reading suggestions for her study. And then she has also a question specifically for Professor Janssens. She was wondering if he has some reading suggestions about specifically generated from his studies about the relationship between drug trafficking and corruption. She would like to read more about how corruption has a big impact on the possibility to traffic drugs through the Antwerp airport for her thesis. Thank you.
Okay, since that was directed to me, I think literature. It's always good to start in Latin America. Look at literature on Mexico drug cartels, Colombian drug cartels. You know the famous quote of Pablo Escobar with regard to plata o plomo, of plomo or plata. I know the choice between silver or bullets or metal. I think this is the main issue. If you talk about corruption, the reason as to why we do not enforce anti-corruption policies or integrity policies might have an economic reason once again. Every integrity policy that you introduce in the port of Antwerp slows down the economic process. And it's about money. It's basically about money. And people involved in corruption, it is about money. If you look at the numbers, the figures that go around, that is based on our interviews that we did, these are high figures. So if you would start out with reading on the relationship between drug trafficking, start by reading the basic stuff from Latin America, and there you have it. But rest assured that the rule of law and the way we conceive the legitimate monopoly of the use of force is completely different in the continental Europe compared to Latin America, because Latin America, you see infighting between armed groups over control over the states. So this has an additional impact. That's why we call it narco states very often. So you cannot compare our situation with, well, in Belgium, with the Latin American situation, especially in Mexico or in Colombia, because our perception of rule of law is something different. But the main connection between drugs and corruption you can easily find in literature in Latin America.
Okay, thank you for the answer. Alexander asks, do you think a common integrity anti-corruption charter for all the actors involved in fighting drug-related crime in the port of Antwerp is a good idea, is necessary? If you could propose one change to the anti-corruption policy regarding drug crime in Antwerp and in Belgium, what would you propose? Is for the speakers in general. So anyone can answer.
Okay, I'll go ahead. I think that first of all, I think we need to create something like the untouchables. You see that we have different organizations within the integrated approach towards drug trafficking in Antwerp, the port of Antwerp, and this is called the Kali team and the Kali functioning. Well, basically, we need to have that integrated, uniform Kali charter, which I was talking about. I do not think that the individual code of conducts and disciplinary measures of each and every organization involved in the integrated approach towards combating drug trafficking is sufficient. We know it's not the case for the police. I already told you, once clean, always clean. The police are being screened when they enter the police force at age 18, for example, and at best they're screened once more. But in the career of 40 to 42 years old, I mean, they're never going to be screened. Disciplinary measures at a local police is not going to happen. I know too many occasions in which the police just go ahead, but because the statute is very difficult. It's a complex statute. It's very difficult to fire people within the police. The same goes for customs authorities. The same goes for judges. I mean, in 2011, when we did the research on national integrity system in Belgium, we also saw these flaws in disciplinary measures for justice, for magistrates and court officials. So basically, yes, I would propose that we have an additional charter, so an untouchable something charter, and you're not going to have that 100% untouchable thing, but that we have a problem is resonated clearly through the fact that we only were able to monitor. That's a classified or a secret mission, the Sky ECC operation, only for 3 weeks. So it lasted for 3 weeks. And of course, we have a million years to analyze these data, but only 3 weeks before it was released to the drug criminals or outside world. So this is rather insane. So we need to have an integrated policy to create some sort of untouchables. So that's what I would propose, and that's something that I would do as well to change the approach towards drug trafficking in Antwerp.
Okay, thank you very much. Tom asks the role of a parliamentary institution like the Comité P in stimulating, forcing the implementation and execution of an anti-corruption policy in police is a question for the Belgian speakers, I guess.
Just, I think like Comité P or the other parliamentary institutions like Comité E for the information services, or we also are a parliamentary institution, play an important role, I think, in anti-corruption, because first of all they are the external and will be in the new legislation normally the external reporting channel for the police. So they have to play an important role in taking their responsibility in whistleblowing, in investigating the reporting cases. So there they play an important role. And I think it's not only investigating, reporting, and closing the case, but what is important, I think, is at the end of investigations that they also add recommendations and really follow up these recommendations. If they find out during the investigation that some procedures are missing, or that there is, for example, no integrity policy, because I think integrity policy or a code in one institution is still very important. So if they find out that some procedures are missing, they can put it in the report and try to follow up, check every 3 months or every 6 months if they really implemented what they have written in the report. And then you have a really an important contribution, I think, to anti-corruption policy as a parliamentary institution. Thank you.
Thanks to you. Marco, a question for you.
Hold on.
Jelle wanted to answer.
Yes, I want to add something. Because Gudrun is absolutely correct. So the Committee P, the external super monitoring organizations, the Federal Ombudsman, these are very important organizations. The main problem that we see is that while they produce reports, Committee P as well, they're not being read by politicians in the parliament. A clear case was, for example, the anti-corruption organization within the police, federal police, the CDBC or the OCRC. This is the anti-corruption organization specifically designed to fight corruption in Belgium. 2 years ago, the supervising magistrate said, well, this is no longer working. They have 10 people. Private corruption is never investigated. So we do not have the means, the measures. And it later catching dust in the parliament. So while these organizations are important, and we do have these organizations, politicians need to be aware. And this is my main issue now. It has been 10 years that corruption has been a policy priority, but now it should be once again. And they neglect the reports that are being written. And I know they listen to the federal ombudsperson, and these organizations do their best to give advices, but the main issue is still with politics. They don't care.
Thank you for your words, your clarification.
And everyone is baffled.
Yeah, we were digesting your words. It was important. Okay, I will proceed with a question for Marco. If you have a successful example in Italy about the monitoring process that you just presented us a few minutes ago.
Yes, there are a few different examples that are applied. I speak in general just to give a sort of big picture of what's happening. It's not something that started really in the past, but it's something that, as you understand, is happening now in Italy. There are different community that were built during last year, and they monitor different things because as I told before, it's really strict to the territory, the context on which people and community lives. So there are community bases that are working on public procurements applied to some the buildings and stuff like that in the neighborhood, in some neighborhood in Sicily, and the same can happen in the north of Italy. There are other community monitoring community that are looking at the department health system, local department health system, how they use the money for the hospital or in some specific field. So it can be they can be different. The success, we cannot say if a monitoring community is successful. We can say if it exists and if it's able to survive, to reproduce, to shed light on problem, and to create a system and a network of people and association that focus on that problem. I think that that's the real no goal with whom we can say, with which we can say that our community is successful.
Thank you, Marco. There are a few questions for Gudrun. I will start with the first one. Which is, in your opinion, the biggest flaw in the Whistleblowers Directive?
The biggest, I don't understand.
The biggest flaw.
The flow and
drawback, a weak point in the directive.
In the directive.
Concerning the whistleblowers, if there is any, in your opinion.
What is a problem might be in the transposition. So the aspect, for example, of protection is not really elaborated in detail in the EU directive. So that can be a problem because now we see in the transposition that a lot of parties, responsible parties, say yes, that protection. Yes, it's important, but we give to people that that need protection. We give a kind of paper, a certificate, and they can go to court to ask for to ask for redress, for example. And that's a bit. I think that's a bit too easy to send everybody to court. Everybody knows that judicial procedures are quite formal, are difficult, are not that accessible. So I think that everybody has to do some efforts to create also something before the judicial procedure, something like a mediation between the reporting system and the organization to search for redress for the victim of retaliation. So that I think is a weak point, that the EU directive is not that detailed. Also the aspect, for example, of public disclosure, very good that is taken in the EU directive, but is also up to the member states to create organizations, to create a system where people who made to disclose in public can ask for protection. So it's also it's left to the member states to choose the right institution to take responsibility for these aspects. So I think the weak point of the EU directive is that it's on some points not really detailed and leaves a lot of choice to the member states.
Okay, thank you. It's already 9, so I think we can get to the last question, unless Sarah would like to add something else, but I will go for the one that can be the last question, concerning, for Gudrun again, concerning Belgium, or anyway in general, even for other countries, which could be the biggest obstacle in enforcing, make it stronger, the whistleblowers directive, in your opinion?
The largest obstacle is that that maybe not everybody, or not every organization is in favor of creating a well-developed and really independent whistleblowing system. So we will the control element in the future will be very important to see if all the organizations in the private sector and also in the public sector are really transposing in line with the EU directive. So that's the largest obstacle, that not all the parties see the interests of whistleblowing and try and see other interests that are more important than installing a reporting system.
Thank you. I would like to thank you once again, the audience and all the volunteers that asked questions and showed interest in the workshop. And now I leave the floor to Sarah.
That was all very, very interesting. Thank you very much to all of you for watching, and for the speakers to have enlightened us and raised some very interesting food for thought. We're very sorry that for the second year in a row we had to switch over to an online event, but we're so grateful that you were all with us tonight, and we hope COVID will allow us to meet you in the flesh for the 2022 edition of International Anti-Corruption Day. Let me just say that BASTA is a group of committed and passionate and enthusiastic volunteers with very different but complementary competences and skills. You don't have to be an expert to get involved in the fight against corruption and organized crime or to join us. So if any of you are interested in taking an active part in our activities and meetings, you can always contact us through email or through our social media channels. Thank you again, and enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Bye.